We have James. You may have already met James virtually, because when did we do that?
A couple months ago, a few months ago.
A few months ago,
yeah.
James, all the way from Dublin, California, did a poetry reading with his first book, Canvas, and it was amazing. I forget how many people we had, but it was on Zoom, and it was a great evening. So James got in touch with me not too long ago and said, hey, I'm going to be in the neighborhood in July. Do you want to do it in person? So here we are. And James has donated copies of both his books to both of the branches of the library, so they are available for you to take out as well. But I'm going to let you, James has a connection to Lake of Bays, long-time connection. I'm going to mess it up though, so I'm going to let you do it. But welcome and thank you, because I said this to you a couple times. I am not really a poetry person. I've never claimed to be. By the end of James's session on Zoom, I wanted to go read his poems because they really connected and really spoke to me. Like it's amazing for me to hear a poem that just grabs you. And so I'm hoping it'll do the same for you tonight. So thank you, and welcome. Take it away.
So I'm on vacation, staying with my parents who live right around the corner. We could pretty much have walked here if we wanted to do a hike. And I've been up in this area many times. In the summer, going to Foxwood Inn, may it rest in peace. In the winter, going to Hidden Valley, where I learned how to ski. And skiing in California, Sierras, it's pretty amazing. But I will always be thankful of learning to ski here. So yes, and the Dwight Library, what a wonderfully cozy library. I was thinking the perfect word, cozy. And it's got all these little elements of cottage country. Just love it. I just love it. And so Kathy's been really cool to work with. And when I said, hey, I'm going to be up on vacation for a week, do an in-person reading, he responded right away. So I love performing my poetry, and I'm excited to have an audience to do it. If you could take a moment to check your phones, and since in poetry every word counts. So take it off of vibrate so that, actually I should write a poem that relies on phones going off. There's an idea. But not that. That's planted a seed in my mind. I'll have to do something with that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through some poems from my first book, some poems from my second book. I've selected poems that in some cases are connected very much to this area, which I'm sure you'll recognize. I'm going to share some poems that have never been shared in public before, that are unpublished, and I have two books, one that's two additional books, one which is out for a bunch of contests right now, and I'm doing the long wait, and then another book which I'll talk about in a little bit that I've only just started. That'll probably take me 6 months to a year to finish. So as Kathy said, I'm the Poet Laureate of Dublin, California. So if you came here to see Dublin, Ireland Poet Laureate, remember Dublin, Ireland came from somewhere. It wasn't Dublin, California, because it's only been around 40 years. So Dublin, Ireland's been a little bit longer. But we do have a connection to Ireland. There are a lot of Irish connections. Many of the schools have names that connect back to Irish heritage, and I just learned now that part of my heritage is Scottish, with some Irish tucked in there too. Born in the States, but lived most of my life in Canada, so I have two passports, so I have an escape route if things go any further south of the border. All right. I'm going to start with a poem that was inspired by Foxwood Inn, what used to be right around the corner. Does anybody remember Foxwood Inn? Yeah. Well, that we spent many summers there. My parents did musical festivals there, and there was also Teen Week at Foxwood Inn. So this poem, I think everyone in this room can relate to, and it's called Crush. Crush. Teen Week at Foxwood Inn. I'm 15, scrawny, bookwormed and shy. She arrives so tall, her rich brown curls waving a smile, dazzling and confident. The crush envelops me, its weight taking my breath away. As she turns the corner, there is no time to say hi, and I fear being caught staring too long. Each morning after breakfast, I peek over my paperback, waiting for her to pass by. And if her eyes catch mine, I shrink and blush, my heart crushed and racing. Later, by the dock, the jocks show off their running, shirtless, headlong dives while I sit, silently, on a fading Muskoka chair, tucking my book under a towel, avoiding splashes. When the last night comes, her name a mystery still, with stairway to heaven's sorrowful intro begun, I crush fear, walking towards her, extending my hand, offering a dance. She looks me in the eye and quietly nods, no, and takes the dance floor with one of the diving boys. I walk into darkness, across dew-damp grass down to the end of the dock, sitting, legs swinging, toes caressing the still cool lake, Robert Plant echoing in the distance. Between chords I hear footsteps. She's there, her hand on my shoulder, a tear sliding down my cheek. I like you, James, but just as a friend, sitting down beside me as the song ends. I feel the crush as my imagined first kiss drifts away with the ripples beneath my feet, but in time, smile, eyes closed and dry, replaying her saying my name. Crush. So that poem, I had that experience, which was very powerful because she was very graceful, and it taught me a very important lesson. Someone doesn't have to be interested in you, but they can still be respectful. And so I was, it was a very positive experience, despite being crushed. And then I was figuring out how to write it, and then I thought, how many ways can I use the word crush? And that was sort of with poetry, you'll have a framing or an image or a set of words, and then there's something that pulls it together. And so for this, it's like I'm going to think of every possible way to use the word crush. All right, so now I'm going to read a couple of poems inspired by my parents, because if you don't do that, they brought you into this world, they can take you out. So this poem is from my new book, Portraits of Red and Gray, which came out a couple months ago. Love the cover. You'll see my first book, Canvas, the cover is here. And my first book, the cover art was done by a friend of mine. He used a technique called black powder, which I will talk about in a little bit. This book was about a trip I took to the Soviet Union, primarily in 1983, unintentionally timely, and I will read a couple of selections from that later. But this first poem is inspired by my dad. The New Yorkers. Visiting last fall, I noticed The New Yorker on your kitchen counter. Our issues identical, but for the address boxes. One marked California, well lit by endless sun. The other Lake of Bays, burrowed deep in pine. I wonder, do we skip the same reviews, ponder the same poems, laugh at the same cartoons? Do you display a curated selection of covers on your coffee table and bathroom magazine rack? When I was younger, I would sit cross-legged among your colorful, unread stacks. So many words left to learn, I thought, as I thumbed through another issue. As I walked back from the mailbox, my copy buried in a pile of bills, I imagine you lingering in bed, hiding from Mom, finishing one last page. I begin with fiction and wonder, are you searching for fiction too? Or have you fallen back asleep as the pages slip through your fingers? The New Yorkers. Now, about the New Yorker magazine, wonderful magazine, but they should really have a monthly option because I cannot get through it every week. It just builds and builds until you almost read nothing because it's overwhelming. And of course, the dream of every poet is to someday be published in the New Yorker. I am waiting on that someday, but it will happen. I'm determined. This next poem is inspired by my mom. My parents are sitting back there. Her favorite chair is covered with thread. I watch Mom transfixed as she sits, leaning forward, turning pain into reeds that will hold a pure standard A. She sharpens her knife, swipe by swipe on oiled stone, whittling with a soothing swish, shedding slivers thinner than air. Thread from spools of red, green, and black anchored to her favorite chair, binding shaped reeds to steel staples. I've always wondered what the colors mean. I silently listen as Mom practices, starting with scales, then her solo, each note tested and perfected until opening night arrives. She takes the stage, her oboe in hand, reed set snug, moistened and ready, awaiting the conductor's tap. With the grace of a loon's voice she begins, soaring to vibrato highs, coaxing tears with sorrowful lows, from a couple sitting down the row, hand in hand, entranced and still. I imagine Mom's notes dancing across the spotlit stage until applause breaks the quiet. She rises, bows, her oboe in hand, that reed triumphant. So when if you've ever gone to an oboist's house, you are guaranteed to see chairs with thread wrapped around, a favorite chair, and there's one after another. The thread could be removed, but it's almost, I think, like a library of reeds built up over time. All right, so now I'm going to do a little show and tell. So I love writing ekphrastic poetry. Ekphrastic poetry, as my dad said, is a word I love to say, so I find every excuse to say it. And ekphrastic poetry is poems that are inspired by photographs, by artwork, by sculpture, and you use that as a starting point. And poets are always looking for prompts, and so ekphrastic poetry is a way to do that. The first one I decided to add this last night, is also inspired by this area, and this is a poem I was asked to write about a Canadian artist, Bert Weir. And to do this, I looked at a bunch of his artwork to come up with inspiration. So this is not based on one piece of art, but almost like a portfolio. Landscape after Bert Weir. Where canvas ends and bush begins, each watercolor brushstroke blends sky into spring. When wildflowers bloom in bursts of blue, a young buck pauses, ears perked, eyes peak, then leaping through chlorophyll-shaded grasses towards the painter. Forest creeps with fallen seeds that burrow deep across the meadow, too long left fallow, waiting for an arbor frame to mark the grove with summer greens smudged into indigo sky. Then reds in fall lead winter's march, October nights with storm clouds build, billowing grays mute tree line's edge, a blur of hues, pine needles blend, while in the shadows, empty spaces hide fallen branches made for kindling, flames that light the easel's canvas, illuminating bush wall tales. Then, finally, all seasons blend as Mother Earth, her colors called to dance upon a summer breeze, or crisply waltz at autumn's peak, or pause just so for northern lights that steal the palette and paint the sky. So Bert Weir, a beautiful artist that if you haven't heard the name, he passed away several years ago, but he's just a beautiful watercolor primarily. All right, so now I'm going to read the second ekphrastic poem. This is from my first book. It's called Powder. Fingertips stained by pistol powder piled, burying brushstrokes. You twist the fuse wires, tucking them snug, awaiting battery's spark. When you ignite the powder, time distorts, a blinding flash of flame and smoke. A metal tube focusing flying detritus from chain reaction's fury. When fire cools, steam drifts away, scorched canvas revealed. You delicately carve the soot-soaked clay, unveiling a tattered flag. Transfixed by blackened brushstrokes, delicate lines and flame, I savor the lingering scent of scorched powder. Now that was inspired by an incredible piece of art, which I am very fortunate to have the original of. It's the cover artist I work with again. So she does a type of artistry called black powder art. So she paints, covers up parts of the painting with clay, puts a cylinder, fills it with gunpowder, sets it off. In the case of the cover of canvas, there were 3 ignitions, and then that's what creates this effect. And then she scrapes away the clay to reveal the painting, which in this case is the iconic photo taken during the protest, the George Floyd's protests, and it's someone running by a burning liquor store with an American flag upside down. So With this, it's just barely there. You have to lean in. So I got the original hanging in my study. All right, now this one was inspired by a, very loosely inspired, and I'll explain how, by a sculptor. Carved. 1. The sculptor prepares her tools. A discarded dentist probe for subtle detail. A twisted rake and wire brush to drape skin. Stepping back, she searches inside the polymer clay block for figures hidden, awaiting release. She starts by sculpting with her fingers, digging, smoothing, molding the clay until features emerge. One tool, then another, shaping, carving, blending, occasionally placing slabs of clay to form curled hair or add a flowing skirt. The sculptor's world collapses inward, city cacophony muted, just fingers, tools, clay, working until in time there is nothing left to carve. 2. The poet prepares his tools, a blank page for letters, syllables, words, phrases, a puzzle to untangle, finding order and place. Stepping back, he stares at the empty page, searching memories for images to transform into well-ordered lines. He starts with random words, pleasing sounds, rhymes, and throwaway couplets to be worked and reworked. Words become phrases, become stanzas, whispered aloud to test their resonance, set aside to revisit later, discarded when impossible to mold. The poet searches for perfection, pacing the floor perplexed until with the final pen stroke the poem appears. 3. The sculptor's work set on a shelf, the poet's page slipped in a book, visions carved in clay and words, buried deep, unseen, unheard. Now that was very, very, very loosely inspired by this really macabre sculpture. This is actually not finished, but it was a work in progress by a friend of mine. And I was really fascinated just by sculpture in general, just the detail. So then, I don't know anything about sculpture. I admire it, but I've never done it. And I don't think the sculptures I did in elementary school count. So what did I do? I think this is something that people don't realize about poets, is they do a lot of research. So I watched hours of sculpting videos, and then listened to the words, and looked and researched what words are used, looking for those words that are poetic in nature, and then try to get inside a sculptor's head as best I can, and then write about it. Okay. All right, so this next one is based on a photograph. So this was a really cool ekphrastic art show that was done in a neighboring city, and there were, I think, 40 poet-artist pairs who created poetry, wrote poems to existing art, and then they were all on display for a couple months. It was really cool to be part of that, and there was a book published from it. So this is my contribution. Ode to Dahlia, after a photo by Vanessa Thomas. Dahlia, bursting in green. Her shimmering petals pour ever outward in perfect radials, mathematical and infinite. Exploring every subtle shadow, curve, and line, diving deeper into the labyrinth of purest perfection and design. Who crafted her flawless symmetry? Is it real or digital trickery? Mother Earth laughs, then smiles. I've had 1 billion years, you see, to mutate and play patiently. Random is my grand design. No need for planning, only time. So that was inspired by this incredible photograph. So Vanessa Thomas is a friend of mine in Dublin, California. It's a photograph that she has color altered, and it's a photo of a dahlia. And as soon as I saw it, I went, oh, there's a poem in there. You just kind of know, and I knew there was a good poem in there somewhere. All right, now I want to read pretty much my most Canadian of poems. And this is from a father-son trip that I took with my father. I've only got one. And went in, as far as I know, And I went into the heart of Tomography with my dad. So the poem, this is a longer poem, multi-part poem, is called Into the Heart of Tomography. 1. Mom leaves us by the dock with sleeping bag bundles, rain slicks, boots, scarves, double socks, flashlights, aspirin, Tums, cough syrup, a few hugs, a wave goodbye, then Dad and I wait for the motorboat taxi, anxious to enter Tomography. Base camp holds reminders of home. Real toilets, 2-ply paper, sinks, running water, real beds, mattresses. The wilderness on all sides doesn't seem real. We read and snooze and kick ass in ping pong as the other sons and fathers arrive. I wonder, why leave this behind to sleep on a rock? John and Marty are in charge. We help them load 10 days of food into tightly packed wooden boxes. They call them wanigans. Salted meat, portioned cereal, pancake mix, dried milk, carefully sorted, ordered layers, each layer a meal, each serving assigned. John leads us to the dock and a line of waiting wooden canoes. Step in, steady, don't stand up, use both hands, stay low. We paddle in rhythmic strokes, pull in, sweep out, leaving vortexes swirling behind us. We practice capsizing. Dad and I cling to the gunwale, wave, breathe, wait, until canoes surround us, pulling us out, chilled and dripping. Our mighty rescuers tumble over, joining the waterlogged victims, cursing at the bare-bottomed canoes and splashing, bobbing heads. 2. Night falls slowly on an evening in deep summer. Hours before our departure, I wandered out alone to watch the canoes slumbering silently and run my fingers along the smooth wooden skin. A pre-dawn clanging bell and fumbling through dew-soaked blackness to lift the canoes from their beds, grumbling, then slide them over sand into crisp water that chills me awake through my feet, legs, spine. We begin, gliding across the lake, my fingers, hands, arms joined with the paddle, pulling forward, repeating endlessly. I swallow the air, guzzling deep, delicious gulps. I feel the near silence. No sirens, tire skids, engines, horns, TVs, machines. Just the caress of breeze as we dip and pull, leaving blue ripples behind us. We're signaled to shore, a campsite hidden between towering pines and a swarm of insects. The fathers try to cook. John and Marty gather wood, building a fire until it pops. Dinner tastes like ash and smoke. Every drink of bug juice wiggles. I've never tasted food so wonderful. I've never felt so tired. We compete for clear land. Our tents appear one by one, tiny pyramids under an infinite blanket of night. The solid rock between me, Dad snoring beside. I can't hold myself awake, leaving darkness behind. 3. It's my turn to help gather firewood. Marty slings an axe over his shoulder and we cross to an island. I follow him, silently, ignorant, watching from a distance as his blade rips into a dead pine. Severed, falls, crashing. I scurry with logs, filling the canoe and avoiding Marty's swinging axe. Odd. We approach our first portage. I carefully choose the lightest box, then strap it to my forehead with a tump line. The fathers balance canoes above them, heads hidden. I try not to laugh at these four-legged creatures. We walked for hours, it seems. How far is a mile? My mouth too dry to ask. 4. Our next campsite is barren rock, barely alive. Trees cling to small patches of soil. We lie back after summer on pure Canadian shield, our stomachs full of potatoes, cured meat, marshmallows. The darkness pinpointed by 1,000 stars freed from the city's blazing light. I follow satellites, arcs from meteor trails, and connect the dots of ancient figures. Dawn. Our canoes enter the river's mouth and we are swallowed by a tangle of branches. My father guides us through the twisted maze, We duck under fallen trees. The forest blurs sunlight into a rich green. I just read The Heart of Darkness at school. I scan the shore for Kurtz. 5. Our last night. The sky is black with storm clouds. We eat dinner quickly, expecting rain. A tent flies from its anchors. We chase it, laughing, then wrap ourselves in plastic sheets as a wall of water approaches, lit in flashes by lightning. The storm passes and clouds crumble, uncovering sunshine and sunset. We follow the storms back as a rainbow trails behind, its colors stretching from treetops to water's edge. We push off one more time into lazy swirls of mist that float across the lake. Our canoes slide forward through water smooth as polished glass. I try not to breathe, fearing it will shatter. So it was a wonderful father-son trip. And something I want to talk about for a moment here is the incredible power of poetry to unlock memories. So I wrote this poem many years after the trip, many years, and I didn't remember any of those details initially, but the process of writing it down and thinking really hard about it, and for a poem like this, I'll actually close my eyes and just try to replay it like a movie in my mind, and then figure out how to describe it. You just remember more and more. The more you write down, the more you remember. So half of this book, which I'll read a little bit in a moment, is actually this trip to Russia, 25 or 26 poems, and it took me 4 months to write, and I was amazed at what I remembered. So if there's something important to you, whether you know how to write poetry or not, the act of writing it down is like a key to your memories. It really is extraordinary what happens. All right, so now I'm taking you on journeys all over the place. Now I'm going to take you on, of those 26 poems, I'm going to read exactly 2. To read the other 26, you have to buy my book. So this is the hook. So this in my first book, I actually included, I think, like 5 excerpts, and I had multiple readers say, "Is there more of that Russia poem?" And so that inspired me to do this book of poems. And it's an impossible poem to place. You can't send a 26 poem, 30, 40 page poem to get placed in a magazine. It's not even worth it. You'll get rejected before you even hit send. So I wasn't sure where to find a home, and this became the perfect home. And then the designer I work with found a lithograph by a Soviet artist that was created the year I went to Russia. Just coincidentally. So here is number 12. I'm going to read two excerpts. Number 12 from Portraits of Red and Gray. Deep into hollowed holes, steep, stretched escalators test my nerves. I reach the bottom and fears forgotten, unfolding like sheets of gold leaf. Subway walls and corporate graffiti replaced by ornate beauty. Fountains, stages, paintings, marble, dreamy, moonlit, towering, magnificent. A sparkling Atlantis, a treasure chest cavern hidden and buried in stone. Phil is missing. Press of travelers, a crowded platform. Shouts from behind, he's running, frightened. Shouts in Russian, a red card flashing, arms waving. A man steps into his path, blocks, catches, holding. Marshy quickly gives directions and leaves us, chasing Phil and his captors. We huddle. A small group in Frank's room trying to joke for hours. We hear from Phil. He was caught trading money, $5 Canadian for 10 Russian rubles. His captors asked for a signed confession. Midnight and they return, exhausted. Doesn't feel like spring vacation. It is dark and close and cold. Marcy was our teacher, and I tracked down my high school teachers who really got me hooked on poetry back in 10th grade. I tracked down all my surviving English teachers and mailed them my book, which created the response I wanted. It was a very emotional response. So Marcy was the teacher who took us on this extraordinary trip to the Soviet Union back in 1983. And he spoke Russian, but pretended he didn't, because that would have made even more difficult situation, more difficult. This is number 23. This is quite the adventure. Never forget it. It's time for our big deal. Phil met a fur hat dealer. Raoul wants a rabbit cap and caviar. I come along for company. The trader meets us behind our hotel at midnight, nervously smoking a frail Russian cigarette. We give him a pack of Marlboros. A cab appears from around the corner and we crawl inside, cramped together in a rattling car, flying through abandoned streets. Our new friend says his apartment is close, but we pass over the same canal 3 times. The driver is boosting the fare. Cobblestones are replaced with asphalt and potholes. The marbled ornate spectacle is gone. Streetlights are dark, or smashed, or flickering. We walk in silence to his doorway. Our English voices are easy targets for keen, ambitious ears. Up a dusty stairwell, inside a grimy doorway, relieved, we drop our coats in his arms and tiptoe past his sleeping mother, ducking into his close, cramped room. He fills our hands with glasses and a shot of vodka. We smile and clink and wince in unison. He says he can only stay in Leningrad if he lives with his mother. He pulls out a box of wedding pictures, women he has married and later divorced for a small fee, so they too can live in the city. He shows off a shoebox bulging with postcards and love letters from faraway tourists. He pulls out 3 black rabbit hats. We each grab one and run our fingers across the smooth fur. Raoul and Phil barter with dollars. I just sit back and watch. The trader's eyes keen for a deal, his head haloed by an enormous American flag draped on the wall above him. It is late, and we tire, and our trader must go to work bottling Pepsi. He goes twice a week for 2 hours, and the government leaves him alone. Our taxi meanders through Leningrad streets, and we do not pass a soul as we wander in darkness. Now that is just one of the poems in the book, or 2 of the poems which unleashed this incredible wave of memories. And at the end of it, I was just astounded at what I remembered, because I didn't remember all that at the beginning, and I had no photographs, of course, because no smartphones back then. I do have, though, the black Russian hat in a box stored safely away that I snuck out in the lining of my leather jacket. I think it's safe now for me to say I snuck it out. I definitely did not mention that. That was scary going through borders. The teacher that we were with, and it's scary to see the nostalgia in Russia for the Soviet Union, because it's definitely not nostalgia you want to aim for. They found his address book with all his Russian contacts and took it, and unfortunately I expect that none of those folks were treated well. So I'm going to read just a few more things, and then I will take any questions you have. So this poem was inspired walking with my wife, and she hears me say, "Stop for a moment," and I get on my phone. It's because some phrases come into my mind. So I will talk a little bit more about it after. It was also turned into a 2-minute hand-drawn animated film, 750 frames by an artist in Italy. Just incredible. This has been interpreted many different ways. So this is the literal way, and then be curious to hear what, or at least have you think about how you would interpret it. Tethered. I've long ago learned to ignore the rhythmic chug of the chain that tethers me to the ocean floor. A chill curls around my painted stripes as fog rolls toward a distant shore and wave-powered bells warn those sailing near. I hear passing ships cutting towards the Golden Gate and imagine their carefully stacked containers swaying in the swells. Later, fog fades, and California's sun steams dew from my metallic frame, unveiling the shore's outline once more. A seagull pauses, perched and chattering, singing me stories until trade winds lift her to dance above whitecaps. Soon, the season of storms returns, bringing fierce waves and wind to power the peals of my warning bells. Deep in winter, mist freezes to my metallic skin, crafting turquoise crystals that flicker in the moonlight. But in time, calm and warmth return, lit by the moon's waning crescent, mirrored on still water's glass. Do I measure time in seasons, or in dawns and dusks, Or count the cycles of frost freezing, then dripping melted down my spine? Or do I set aside time and count the swells, or passing ships, or pods of dolphins, shivers of sharks, colonies of gulls? I dream of one day being released from my tether, my work complete, transformed into turquoise sea glass, smoothed by tides and resting on a shoreline beach, waiting to catch the eye of a strolling passerby. So that was inspired. My wife and I were taking a walk, I'm sure she remembers. It was a pretty windy day along the shore of the Pacific, and I saw this little bell buoy. Didn't know it was called a bell buoy, I just knew it was a buoy. Out in the distance, and I thought, I wonder what it's like to be tethered to the ocean floor. You got this important job, but you dream of not being tethered. And then the animator, she was really moved by it and wanted to do the project. And she thought about COVID and being trapped in her apartment. And a friend of mine in Canada read it, and she thought of her parents who are in their 90s, and they are tethered to their home, but they view their world as smaller, but it's all around them. And every pet that goes by, and every neighbor, and every sound. And it was just really fascinating to see where, for me, it's literally, I thought, oh, that'll make a good poem. And that's the beauty of poetry, is it's intentionally not concrete. Thank you so much. And I will take any questions.